right, so let's talk about Bone Tomahawk, right? So I'll kick things off with this, right? So this admittedly is the first time that I've ever seen this movie, right? This was always a film that
Okay.
I heard about by title, but I just never knew what it was about. I remember you, Ricardo, mentioned it a few times, throughout the years that we've been, doing, podcasting and
This
whatnot, right?
movie, this movie for me was the perfect walk-in blind movie thread.
Yes.
Did not fucking expect this movie to be the way it was and as awesome as it was.
Yes,
I went into it thinking, oh right, it's just like a kind of Western thing. But people tell me go see it real hard. Just go see it. Don't right.
Yes.
And it was like, the person recommended it to me. Anything like that. I just see like cook word of mouth kind of things. I thinking, alright, it's probably like a real hard Western or something like that. Went in and like dog. Well, it's kind of a Western. I mean, yeah,
that's
but
the thing. It's kind of a Western. No, actually, no. It is a Western, huh? It is a Western.
When it switch up real hard. Like
It
real
did.
hard.
Oh, yeah.
It did.
And it catch your boy. But it's one of those really out of going blind and excellent. It still turned out to be this amazing cinematic experience for me.
Yeah. So so in this case, Ricardo is the one who has the most he saw this film before both of us, right? But here's the thing though, it's because it's interesting now, right? Because two things. Well, one, I initially wanted to talk about it because of its 10th anniversary, right? And I was looking for films to talk about for the show, right? And I don't want to say this is an unfortunate thing, but yeah, since its release, we kind of know it as a Western horror film. But I've just always been mindful not to really find out why. I just always knew it as a Western horror. That's all I knew, right? And that it starred Kurt Russell. That's the only things I know, right? But I wish, like you, Ricardo, I wish I went in this film blind. And I guess for that to happen, I would have seen it when it came out or, a year afterwards or whatever. Yeah. I wish I went in blind and just thought, oh, it's just some pretty Western and then seeing what it was, right? But yeah, another reason too is because you mentioned it as one of your favorite films, horror films of the past, 25 years. I was like, okay, I need to rewatch this. No, sorry. I need to watch this.
Yeah. No, when I was going through my list, I was like, oh, you're right. Bone Tomahawk was a horror movie, dread. Like, and that was fucking hard. And I was like, definitely had to make the list.
So thank you, Ricardo. Thank you for putting me back onto that film. Because initially I was like, Bone Tomahawk, I don't know. I never saw the film. I'm not like emotionally connected to it. But then when you put it on your list, I was like, okay, I need to check this out for myself, right?
As the kids say, they kind of cooked.
Yes,
it's really good. Again, I'll admit, a lot of big movies a big factor of movies. And listen, this is something that we could debate about with respect to like promotion and marketing. A lot of movies just work for you a lot more if you're just going blind or you don't know where you're going into. Right?
Yeah,
like a big reason as to why I like the Prestige so much is because of what it did. Like I kind of knew Nolan at the time. It's like, all right, you do Batman, and I knew him for a couple of movies, but I didn't know I was walking into that. And then that movie turned out to be this weird, amazing kind of borderline. You're really sure, and possible sci-fi adventure because it depends on the narrative and unreliable narration and blah blah blah. But that ended up turned out to be just kind of a masterpiece because I went in blind. Right? It was a total misdirection. I mean, that might be ironic and apropos given the nature of the film, right? But I was like, a big factor is just walking into a movie, right? Sorry to say it, but you need to market movies better. Getting kind of tired of these TMI trailers. Guys, they fucking overdoing it. TMI trailers is something you could get away with back in the days before the internet. You had to start editing trailers better. Right? Back in the days when Terminator could have sell out the whole plot line because not that much people go and watch it in theaters anyway, statistically. So you could kind of get away with the bullshit. No. Right. Please stop spoiling that shit, please. However. But yeah, it's stuff like that. And I'm just so glad. I really enjoy a cinematic experience where I go in as blind as can. I have no clue what's going on. I'll try to make the effort nowadays, but like whatever. Like I kind of don't give a shit nowadays. I'm too old for that bullshit. But like back in the days when I was in my late 20s, so I was like I used to really appreciate just going into a blind movie and just thoroughly enjoying it. Like if it's good and it come good, the payoff is great. Is that? And this is one of those. This is definitely one of those on that list of going into something blind and thoroughly enjoying it. So yeah, like I did.
Right. But speaking of trailers, I actually watched a trailer for this, before we even met up here, and I admire the fact that even the trailer itself doesn't even tell you what fucked up shit to look forward to until that
Yep.
last shot, which I will
Right.
bring up, in when I talk with that, when I just lay out my notes as far as what I took down after watching the film, right? So again, this is not going to be a play by play, right? But before I
Right.
begin, I just want to mention that this is the directorial debut of S. Craig Zahler. He followed this up with a film that, believe it or not, I actually talked about with you, Ricardo, on BS Beat and Billy, called Brawl in Cell Block 99, which
Mm-hmm.
starred
Oh,
Vince Vaughn, right?
okay.
And
Right. He
yeah,
did that. Right. Okay.
yeah, and he would follow that up with Dragged Across Concrete in 2018. But here's the thing: the reason why I didn't watch that is because Mel Gibson was in it, and at the time, and up to now, actually, I just have a
Yeah.
really serious issue with that guy. That's all I'll
Yeah.
say.
You can any dog also. Like he
Yeah.
just yeah.
But what I will say though, with these current films, because I think this is the only, like, this is his current filmography right now. Dude has a way of coming up with very visceral titles. Like, think about it. Bone
Yeah.
Tomahawk. There's something undeniably
Right.
visceral about it.
I
Like,
did
just think about
watching
that.
the movie. Watching the movie in retrospect, it's like, oh yeah, right. It makes sense why I call that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like, you
yeah.
know why?
Like, there's something
Yeah.
so
Completely.
gritty though and
Right.
violent about that. Just that phrase alone. Like, yeah, yeah. What was you gonna say, CC?
No, I was going to completely agree. There's something, even just saying them, it's like bone tomahawk, dragged across concrete, brawled in cell block. Like there's something incredibly visceral about the titles, and like the images that they conjure up are very descriptive. And like I think it's interesting. Bone Tomahawk is really interesting because it's a movie that, like, I think, not going into it blind, because I knew about its reputation, I expected to be more violent than it was. But I think what happened is it's the kind of movie where, it's not as violent as people say it is. It's just that the scenes that are violent are so incredibly distinct and
Yep.
memorable.
No,
Like that shot.
that's why this work, because it's not shock value in that sense. It's just because it feels like, okay, that feel like that happened to somebody. Like compared to something like the original Human Centipede or something like that, which whatever. Shock
Yeah.
value bullshit. Can't get into it, but it's too comical for me to enjoy it. But then you have something like just overly gory or overly disgusting, like Serbian film or something like that. Right. I can't get into that either. Because like, all right, who gonna do that? This, given the context of the narrative, make sense. The violence in the context make perfect sense. It's like when it hit, it hit. Like goddamn, of course, sound design people, all them people are like make work, right? But boy, that is why this come together. Boy. It's just solid atmosphere building, dread. And then when you hear bones crunching and meat grinding, and it's like, all right, yeah, yeah, in this space, they're really playing this space. Really, really immersive stuff.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. You're right. The sound design for this is great, right? So yes, folks,
Excellent.
this is my first viewing.
Masterful.
Similar to CC, this is our first time watching this, right? So for me, I really enjoy this film, right? I love how it feels like a mix between The Searchers, classic John Ford masterpiece, right, and The Hills Have Eyes.
Right.
In
Right.
particular,
Right.
the remake,
Yep.
which I
Right.
am personally not a fan of because I felt like the show was shock value for the sake of it, in my opinion. Especially one scene involving a character with a gun, with a shotgun. That's all I'll say. But yeah, that was shock value for the sake of shock value. But just the visceral nature of that film, right? Yeah, I saw like this film like a mix of those two, right? I love how just premise wise, it feels like something that you've seen before, right? It feels like The Searchers, but something like it feels like a western that came out like in the 70s during that whole new American cinema kind of era. Like right after we got the Wild Bunch, still one of the greatest westerns of all time, which ramped the violence up in westerns by 11. Yeah, it feels like just a bleak, very nihilistic take on the Wild West, right? Way worse than what you saw with Sergio Leone and those spaghetti westerns, right? But anyway, so I just love that it just premise wise, it's just about this small party of gunmen who out to just find someone who like there's a kidnapping that takes place, and like early on they assume that it's right out the gate that they're Indians, right? But then you learn that it's actually troglodytes, or cannibalistic troglodytes, right? Or cave dwellers,
There's
right?
a little bit of like when we talk about sinners, the what we call the prequel to sinners. There's a little bit of that that remind me of what we call it, Dust Till Dawn. A little bit.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
A little bit, right? A little,
Yeah.
a little true line. Have a little true line there with the fake out of the beginning. Yeah, you're doing some crime shenanigans, and then it becomes this. And
Yes, 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 yes. You're right.
you know, it get terrified. My God, the switch up. This is a good switch up.
It is. And speaking of
It's so
troglodytes,
good,
right?
yeah.
Speaking of the word troglodytes, right? I love that there's a moment where this guy asks, "Does anybody know how to spell troglodytes?"
Right.
For the telegram.
Oh, that's
That is a
great.
great line.
Yeah.
That is a great line because even when well, I'll get to that character later on, right? But yeah, when a character says that word, I'm like, okay, in that era, would people know what that term means? Because I don't know, like
Yes.
it feels like something modern. Like that term sounds very, very 20th century, not like
Well, yeah,
19th century.
It's an old
It's an
term, but
older
it's
term.
Okay,
because
okay.
one of the characters was very was reasonably educated. We put nine quotes there because it's just once you can read your day, right?
Yeah.
It's that, right? So it's play with that. So he's relatively literate, and they make that conceit, and they build that in terms of like who characters what. Another thing is that I going back and talking about it now, it's like, oh, yeah, right. Matthew Fox was did this.
Yes.
Matthew Fox was
Patrick Wilson, though, I was like, hey, right after
right.
The Conjuring,
But I was
the
thinking,
success of those movies.
at the time, at the time, I really thought Matthew Fox would have blown up more because he was coming off a loss.
Yes.
And he did, the only thing he did was he played the villain in Alex Cross, I think. And that sucked.
Oh, yeah.
And
Alex
he
Cross was
bad in it.
terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, that the Tyler Perry version. That sucked.
That sucked. That sucked.
Oh yeah.
But he was kind of bad in it. And, but the thing is, I really thought this dude would have blown up more, like career-wise. And I really thought he would have been bigger, to be honest. Like he's one of those guys. But I thought he was okay in this. Like, didn't love him. But like, it's like, oh, you're right, he was in this. Like, I wish we see more stuff with that. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, well, speaking of Matthew Fox, right? I love like how similar to his searchers, this is whole deep-rooted disdain towards Indians in general that's always displayed by a singular character. In this case, is Matthew Fox's character. He plays John Bruder, right? And he's this gentlemanly gunslinger, right? And I like that it's set up early on that he had the hots for the wife of Arthur O'Dwyer, who's played by Patrick Wilson, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a moment where he guns down like these two Mexicans who just so happen to stumble onto their camp at night. You know what I mean? Because they're just like minding their business, like, hey, just want to find out what you guys doing here. And like he just grills them for a little bit, and then like blacka, like 4 shots, and I'm like, what? Like not even more than 4 shots basically, right? And it's like a shocking moment though, but I love like how it kind of reminds me basically like how John Wayne's character was in The Searchers, where like he flat out hated Indians, but in that film at least there was a reason why, right? There was a sort of a reason why he had that disdain towards them in the first place, right?
No, I was gonna say I was pleasantly surprised about the way this film talks about race.
Yeah,
like S. Craig Zahler is coming out of, as far as I know about the man, he's coming out of that Texas, the kind of like the Texas, not the Austin film scene, but the kind of like the Texas film scene, and some of that. It's a decently conservative film ecosystem, and he gets, working with people like Mel Gibson, like he has a bit of reputation as being a more of a conservative filmmaker, not one of the crazy ones, but just like little C. And so I was just blatantly surprised. Like there's that one line where they said something about like, after the one character kills the two Mexicans and the other guy accepts what happened. And the old man is like, he was just telling them a thing or two about manifest destiny. And I was like, what are you no, and like there's a through line about that throughout the movie of like kind of the implication that like the film is not about racism per se, but good Lord, do some of the moments where the characters are at their most bigoted and racist actually makes things worse. Like the whole thing where they killed the two Mexicans comes back to bite them in the ass, because then when the rest of the party catches up with them, they lose their horse.
Yeah, and like, John collects like a knife to the shoulder though, and you would think that John would have been like way sharper enough now to defend himself, but it's like no, like dude is like going into his shoulder. I'm like, wow, right? And then eventually it leads to a great scene where it's like and it's him going towards his horse, like his horse is dead, and you could see it on his face, like you don't want to do it, but then one shot, blow, that's it, the end. Yeah, it humanizes the character at this point. That's what I love about that moment.
I was so impressed with how the film manages to be both like grisly and harsh, but without ever really being edgy. Like that was something
Right.
that really pleasantly surprised me. Like the
Right.
film never pushes into. I mean, and I think like it's interesting because of the reputation the film has, but most of the runtime is these four men on this very slow burning. It reminds me, in my head as I'm watching the film, I was comparing it to some of the other westerns that came out at the time because I'm actually not always the biggest fan of the 2000s and 2010s era of westerns. There's some phenomenal ones, but for the most part, the reason I'm not the biggest fan is that they don't like they generally look pretty bland. Like these are films that tend to be pretty washed out. They're going for kind of a rather generic form of quote unquote realism where they tend to emphasize like grittiness and dirt and blah blah blah.
Right.
Like,
You know, as you bring up that, right? I'm wondering, right? But forgive me, folks. I've only seen like a few episodes of this show. I really should
Mhm.
sit down and watch this. I wonder if this is because of the success of Deadwood. Like if
Some of it, I think,
Deadwood
like,
was
yeah,
like,
probably,
oh,
because-
we
yeah,
this
probably
is this is
Deadwood
the
is-
this is the
well-
aesthetic. Let's go with this. You know.
I
Right. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
Deadwood,
both-
yeah, True Grit.
yes,
That's
True
a
Grit
good
was
sense.
huge. I think
Yeah.
it's very important. Well, I think that like because what happens is you know Unforgiven comes out in the 90s, and
Right.
that's when we decide that the Western is dead, which I could write a whole book about the quote unquote death of the Western and when the Western really died and when and how it isn't really dead, but whatever. But what happens is most of the Westerns of the like 2000s and 2010s tend to be revisionist Westerns. And
Right.
a lot of them tend to be trying to go for a quote unquote like realistic aesthetics, and so a lot of them look quite bland. A big exception is any Western and during this period made by Quentin Tarantino, because both The Hateful
Right.
Eight and
But that came
Django
after, yeah.
Unchained.
Like for me, Slow West. Slow West was okay.
Slow West is another. Yeah,
Well, probably my favorite, even though the main actor in the doghouse, what do you call it?
is it Cody
that
Smith McGee or
No, James Samuel movie. That's like my like that way I had to do. It's just a straight up
okay,
like a
yeah,
comic book movie.
Or the
was-
Holiday Fall.
Holiday Fall, right?
Yeah, yeah. Love that film.
like
Love
that.
that film.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
stuff
me
like
too,
that.
me
Like
too.
you had to do that, but that kind of came in after. To me,
Yeah,
you had to do the whole bring color to it or do something interesting later with it, as a conceit. And
Well-
we never really get anything good like that. Like News of the World, I think that came after. I forget what year that was. That was 2020, right?
Yeah, well,
Stuff like that.
like there's a bunch of them from this era that I like and I don't love. Like there's a couple like that I wish were just a little more visually interesting, or I would have liked them better. I think about
Right.
oh goodness, is it Hostiles with Christian Bale, like that what like which comes out at the same time, 310 to Yuma. There's like a couple
Right,
like that that are. I'm like, I wish I liked this better, but these colors are just so uninteresting. But in Bone Tomahawk, I felt that way originally. Like when the film first started, I was like, oh, okay, another Western that looks like all the other Westerns that were coming out in the 2000s and 2010s.
Right.
And what ends up happening is the violence and the way that the film never flinches from its violence matches the somewhat bleak, washed out aesthetics. Like it's a film that you
Right.
could almost see them just doing it straight up in black and white as a result. Like, and it's actually it's like, oh, okay, this actually fits. Like it's not just kind of a lazy stab at realism, because it's a movie that goes in a very pulpy direction. Like that twist,
The reveal is yeah. That's where it get
The
hilarious
reveal-
and pulpy. I think
it's very pulpy.
this and Gone Girl had like the twist, like, oh, they had to catch you with something kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like it's that. Yeah, at the
Like,
time.
oh,
Yeah.
this is the direction we're going. Okay, I wasn't
Right.
expecting this at all. Like, yeah, just like this. It felt like reading a horror comic from the like 70s or 80s. Like it felt like that same era, like that Matthew's talking about, of like the gritty westerns. It felt like a kind of, I don't know, like if you did like a Western horror comic through like Tales of the Crypt or something. Like I feel like it would
Or
be
Creep Show or something like that.
or Creep Show or something, like, or any of the EC comics, like horror comics. Like I felt it's got that same kind of shock value to it, while also having a certain like kind of grit to its aesthetic, but also incredibly character focused. Like this main cast, the four men that we spend most of the film with, are all brilliantly written and perfectly cast. I don't know the
Yes.
last time I've seen a film. I don't know the last time I've seen a film with this intimate a cast where every single one of them is perfectly cast. Like, I was on the fence about the Matthew Fox character at first. Like, I
Right.
didn't like him very much. And then I realized I wasn't supposed to like him. And he was supposed to be a bit of an asshole. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, man, I really appreciate this character. Richard Jenkins as
Right.
the old man, I
Yes.
didn't recognize him at first. I did not recognize that it was the same, that it was the actor. Like, I did not recognize him. Talk about Del Toro as someone who's been in a couple Del Toro projects at this point. I did not know that was him in that role. And then like Patrick Wilson, I really appreciate that Patrick Wilson is able to sell the leg injury his character has in that movie so well.
Oh, he
throughout the
does.
whole-
He
He's a
does.
very a very slept on actor. And listen,
He
I really
is.
I'm very halfway on the Conjured films, but like he's really good at
Yeah.
those too. Like he's a good, really good actor. He needs something better. Like I do think the Conjured films kind of slightly disservice him. I don't like that people who fans of those
Mhm.
films. I'm not one of them, but it's like whatever. But yeah, so is that.
How do you feel? How do you feel about him in Watchmen?
All right, no, that's why that's why I really like loved him in like as Night Owl. Right?
Okay,
Like I
yeah,
thought
yeah.
he was great in that. Like
Yeah.
but is some other movie he did with I think it's a really pulpy movie with Samuel L. Jackson where Sam Jackson was a cop and he was the husband, the neighbor. What is the name of that movie?
Oh yeah, no, I
what was
know
it?
exactly the one you're talking about. It's
Right. It's real dumb, but he was great in it. I was like, yeah, this guy's like
Lakeview
that-
Terrace.
right, yeah,
Yes.
that.
Wow,
I-
wow. I haven't heard about that in years. Wow.
Right. But I think it's like
That
he's such
movie
an
is
incredibly
wild.
slept on actor though. Yeah, no, that movie so dotish, yeah, but it's fun. It's a fun
Then,
movie. But yeah,
then-
it's that, right? He's like an incredibly slept on actor, and it's a shame that we don't get more with him. Like again, I know I know people like really Conjured films, right? I just don't like those films that like it's hard for me to get
Well-
into those movies. But yeah, it's that.
He's
I only
also in
like
a
the first
bunch of James. He's also in a bunch of like other James Wan films. I haven't seen Insidious.
Right.
But I know he's in
Right,
that
that too
as
okay.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he
then
was
also, like,
pretty
Blood
good
and
in
King.
Aquaman. You know, he was.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I like him in that.
Yeah.
Like, he's just getting to play like a bit of a scenery chewing villain. I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. And then he plays a villain role in Hard Candy, but I haven't seen that movie. The one with
Right.
Elliot Page. Like, I've heard that one is rough, but yeah, like, I'm
Yeah.
fascinated.
I haven't seen that.
And then, of course, rounding out the cast of Bone Tomahawk is the man, myth, the legend, and my husband, Kurt Russell.
Good
Yeah.
goddamn Russell boy. That beard though. I mean that beard, right? Come on.
Man,
Right. So this is
I-
the reason I got into this because look, I love Tombstone, right? Yeah, Tombstone
Yes.
goated.
Who doesn't
Absolutely
love
goated.
Tombstone, right?
Yeah, Tombstone goated, that whole scene, no, classic, right? I just still like quote that. Like every time I want to like cut somebody else in a video game or something like that, I'll just be like, no, and I shoot at people. And that's me, right? So so it just to hear he was in this, and like, oh shit, like, and that way it misdirect me in terms of like, where it go because I was like, oh, is it just gonna be like a solid like good Western kind of thing? Like, no, it's like I know how it goes. Is that it already set you?
And I think, I think what might have happened is, like, I mean, if Kurt Russell's already shooting one Western where he has to have a great big beard and mustache, it makes complete sense for him to just not shave and also film the other one. But yeah, but I think it's also interesting because there's a certain movie that comes out 2 years later that I remember talking to you guys about because like I've always been massive Kurt Russell fan. Watching John Carpenter's films got me into him, but then the more of his films I watched after that, I was like, oh, this guy is just incredible. Like, able to play drama, able to play comedy, able to be an incredibly physical actor, able to like sell a really understated performance at times, but then also able to go really over the top when he needs to be. Like this is a man who's been this is the man who's Snake Plissken, but that is also the superhero dad character in Sky High,
Right.
which is insane. But I think,
And I still think his turn as ego is still like absolutely brilliant and terrifying, but it works.
his turn as ego.
Mhm.
One of the best. I remember talking to you guys about that because I was in the middle of college right now. This whole episode has been weirdly nostalgic. I was in college at the
know.
time. in college at the time, and they had just announced that Kurt Russell had been cast as Ego the Living Planet, and I would not shut up. Like, I was all day, I was grinning like an idiot. I was like, you guys don't understand. This is going to be. And everyone's like, I've never heard of this guy. And I'm like, you are Americans. How have you not heard of your greatest national treasure? Like, how have you not heard of the greatest American actor of all time? Because I think the thing I love about Kurt Russell is that he's also like one of the most quintessentially American actors. Like, you could never mistake him for any other nationality, and he plays American characters and archetypes and those types of roles so very well. Oh no, it's just like I can never be in a bad mood watching anything with Kurt Russell in it. But like, even then, I was so surprised by this movie because this is one of his quieter performances. Like, as opposed to some of his like larger than life stuff like Ego, this is one of his quieter roles, which I was taken aback by, actually.
Yeah, agreed. So let's talk about the cannibals themselves, right? And listen, it's funny that Sid Haig, right? The horror icon himself, right, is the first of two characters that's introduced in the film. And listen, I love how the film just sort of lets you know type of movie it is, because it's just this shot of a guy who gets slit, like he gets his throat slit. I'm like, wow, this is how they open the film, This is how the film begins. And I love how the film kind of tells you what you're in for when his friend Purvis, right, who he also gets captured by these cannibals, right? When he does what he does, he's the one who slits the guy's throat, right? But yeah, they encounter and they run into this Native American burial site, and like you're thinking, oh, it's these Native Americans are doing that's going to be the villains here, right? But then Buddy, as in Sid Haig's character, collects an arrow straight through the neck. Is like, oh shit, you know what I mean? So I love how the film itself just early on subverts the expectation, thinking, oh, it's just some kind of like like some sort of violent band of Native Americans, right? But yeah, these troglodytes though are brutal AF too. It's when they're nearing their hideout, if you will, right? When they're nearing their camp, right? One character, I'm not gonna say who, right, collects this projectile stone, right, and it cracks through his wrist. Like, all right, I'll say it one time. It's John, right? The asshole, right? Yeah, he collects a stone that hits him like blow, like, and his wrist is broken. That made me jump. I was like, wow, because I'm just thinking, okay, it's arrows we're talking about, but no, these dudes are taking stones and
they are
using them as weapons. Poor Franklin, right, who is played by Richard Jenkins, right? He collects one blow to the head, to the forehead, and he has this like permanent scar, this permanent wound throughout the rest of the film. That's how brutal these guys are. Well, basically a gash he gets, basically, right? Yeah.
Well, and like, I think what's so wild, like, I really like the bit earlier in the film where they bring in the professor guy who's talking to them about the troglodytes. And he tries to explain to them, he's like, no, you don't understand. It doesn't matter how many people you take. You're all going to die. Like, you don't understand how vicious and how unsympathetic these guys are. Like, it simply does not matter how many people you bring. It doesn't matter what weapons you take. You are all going to die. And, we, the audience, like the characters themselves, are like, yeah, sure, okay, yeah. Every movie you have to like spend so much time telling us how like terrible these guys are going to be, whatever. And then during that first ambush, it's like, oh, I completely understand. Yeah, they're all going to die. Like, because I think what's so wild about the troglodytes is that they just don't give a fuck. Like the troglodytes, they don't wait. They don't.
They got business as they say.
They really do, because like they just come at you. There's no waiting. There's no announcing. There's like maybe a warning sound. There's like did you guys hear that? Yep. I'm not sure. But like, and they spend like.
What is with the fox one from Zootopia? It's about me with the fox where your eyes just get wide. Like, it's that. It's like, dude, this like, when they fight this, especially when they get into the major cavern, the final like big set piece area, you realize how utterly fucked these people are. Like, wow. I'm absolutely terrified. Again, really good atmosphere. Like, that's why great lighting. Like, it does the lighting and set design from that standpoint. It's like you're just like, what going on, Dread? Like, this is the worst, though. It's like one of the worst situations you could find yourself in, though.
It is,
In
yeah.
real life.
And then,
Yeah.
and then like when they come in and they just attack and it's one of the most it's some of the least glamorous action you will ever see in any
Right.
movie, especially in a
Right.
Western, because it's like
Yeah.
this is not characters fighting, like any of the we were talking about John Wick earlier. This is not John Wick. These are
Right.
characters fighting for their lives against people that are actually trying to eat
And-
them. This is also a movie that go ahead.
No, yeah. No, it's pure battle for the marbles. All the marbles for this final fight. Now, you really it borderline existential. Like, it's not like a
Yeah.
tongue or like was it Denzel Washington movie that he remade with the thing with Chris Pratt? I forget the name of the one. Not like that. That just feel like joke thing compared to this shit. Like, way all it done, dude. Like, all he had to lock in and move.
Magnificent Seven.
Magnificent, right? Yeah, it's not. It's not that. It's not a joke thing. You had no time to prepare. You had no time to think. It had nothing like that. They tell you, if you go, you're gone dead. And they just didn't listen and take it seriously. And then they went. And then they, when they FAFO, like that's what it is. FAFO.
And like, it's also a movie it's also one of the most intelligently written movies I've seen in a long time. Like, I really like the way that Patrick Wilson's character, being injured and insisting on coming anyway, and there's so much of the movie where you really think this guy is dragging them down, but the way that pays off and how that character ends up surviving because he uses his brain.
Yes, I love that. I was going to bring that up, so thank you for doing so. Yeah,
good. No, go ahead. Yeah, talk about it.
No, it's great though. This is actually one of the best moments of the film, because you just think you're just there thinking, okay, well, eventually, Patrick Wilson's character is going to be found out that he's going to get killed, right? There's a great moment. It caught me by surprise, right? But it's disgusting, but in a great way, right? Where after he kills one of the troglodytes, right? He says, "Is that jewelry?" And he's looking at this sort of like this object lodged inside the guy's neck, right? And in your head, you're thinking, oh, this is supposed to be some kind of joke, right? So the cannibals, so they probably eat like an arm or a hand, and there was like a bracelet on it, and it just got stuck in his throat. I realized, wait, because when you learn this after he takes it out, right? Yeah, so he literally like kind of removes this bone whistle thing out of his mouth, or out of his throat. And then you realize, oh, that's how they let out these very weird, otherworldly yells, because that's one thing that catches you by surprise, right? They have this weird screech, right? It's not even bird-like. It just has a weird sort of demonic screech shit. I realize, wow, it's like this bone whistle thing that they have there. But even that in itself sounds plausible. Like, in a weird way, it sounds like something that someone with their intellect would come up with, like a way that they could identify each other. If they ambush someone or they end up in an ambush, they need some way to call on, on a friend of theirs or whatever it is to come to help them, right? But I love that it's the guy who's been holding everybody back. He's the one that figures all this out. This is great. I love that.
Because his character has been established to be very intelligent. Like, he's like they don't really treat him as such, and like, the Matthew Fox guy tries to boast that he's the most intelligent one there, but like, Patrick Wilson's character ends up being the smartest one there, and the fact that he is able to use that to overcome the fact that he's limping the whole time is like incredibly, especially it ties into the whole bit that the wife says later when they're all in captivity together, where she's like, it's not the Indians that'll kill you, it's the idiots. That's what's gonna that whole bit is so good. And like, yeah, like oh my god. And like, I think, and also talking about the movie being really intelligent, right? Because there's that moment where you go, wait, if these troglodytes are this vicious, why would they take prisoners? Well, there's an answer to that. It's to eat them. Like, it's the like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, you came up with an answer that was somehow even worse.
Yeah, that's snack for later, right?
Right, it's not, I better keep it fresh. Why we don't kill them right away, except we kill that one character. Oh, geez, that, which I suppose is a good time to talk about that death.
Oh yeah. Let's touch on this though. So yeah, boy, easily the most shocking moment though is one of Kurt Russell's like deputies though. Listen, He gets scalped, right?
Ooh.
Yep.
Stripped naked,
Oh,
has his dick
damn.
chopped off, and then is
Got-
literally chopped in half. I was like, what? Where did this come from? What? This is insane, though. It's hard to watch, but at this point in the film, it's one of those moments that you can't turn away from. You're just locked in from the moment that ambush takes place. I just want to see how in the blue hell these guys are gonna get out of it, right? But when that guy gets killed the way he does, that's when the movie's like, yeah, shit got real, right? I say a scene that even rivals that though is where our hero Kurt Russell now he gets like he's literally like he gets his wound like literally like yeah like one of the troglodytes like actually like wounds him, right? Like sticks a knife and then like wounds him, right? And then takes this flask, right, that was sitting in a bed of hot coals, sorry, and sticks it inside. I felt that. I winced at that. And even worse though, there's a character that finds a rifle, and no lie Ricardo, no lie CC, when that shot goes off and it hits Kurt Russell in the stomach, well in the gut, I jump at that. Just off of that shot. Again, going back to sound design, that gunshot, blow, I jump at that, you know. I jump.
Yeah.
It goes back to what I was saying earlier when I say like you know, Kurt Russell is a phenomenal actor. One of his strengths has always been his ability to sell pain. I don't know if either of you have seen the Robert Zemeckis comedy Used Cars.
No,
But
you're not ever seen it. Right.
There's a it's great comedy. There is a phenomenal gag. It's he plays this sleazy car salesman who's trying to sell a whole bunch of used cars very quickly so he can get the money to run for political office. It's hilarious. There's a great joke where all he has to do is sell that, you know, like he's like leaning confidently against the car and someone shuts the car door and shuts it on his fingers and he just has to like sell that. It's such a little moment, but the way he's so perfectly will like comically be like the way he he sells it so well that like it's easily one of my favorite. It's such a little moment, it's one of my favorite in that movie. But then like you look throughout his filmography and there's like so many other, like whether it's Snake Plissken and his limp in Escape from New York, whether it's the bit in the Tarantino one, Death Proof, where he is trying to he's trying to take care of his own, he's trying to take care of the gunshot to his hand that happens from one of the characters in the finale of the movie, and he's like just in the car trying to, you know, clean and bandage the wound, and he's just like absolutely selling that this is agony. Like, I don't know whether it's comedy, whether it's drama, action, or horror. Russell is very good at selling pain. I don't know what it is. I think it's just that he's like an especially expressive actor, or if it's like the fact, or it's just like being able to be like a little performative. But like, I always forget that he is not actually in pain.
Right.
But I think, like, you know, the beauty of this film, right? I say beauty, right? Is that the show does something very brave, though. And I know other films did this in the past, right? But never in this way, right? Yeah, kind of touch on, you know, kind of call out, you know, the genre of Westerns in terms of how Native Americans are portrayed as savages, right? So it sort of just flips it on its heels, right? 'Cause I love the fact that it's this Native American resident of the town that Kurt Russell and their characters come from is the ones to come and say, yeah, it's these troglodytes are doing it, and they're the type that will rape their mothers before killing them, right? And there's this really uncomfortable moment in the end where you see these two pregnant females, and if you take a note of them, they have bones sticking out their eyes. Boy, that is something that I cannot unsee. I cannot unsee that, right? But yeah. God. I love how the film kind of touches on that because, like, for me, right, like I would love me, I love me, you know, a Western from like the 40s, 50s, and so on, right? Like I used to watch some of them with my dad, used to introduce them to, you know, with that, right? But like, I'll try example, right? Like, for example, there's a Randolph Scott one called Comanche Station, right? Really, really great film, right? But yeah, you know, it's in the title, you know, the Comanches are, you know, the wild savages, right? And it's one of those things that you watch
Mhm.
now and it's like, all right, I understand it's the 50s, okay, that was a cell, all right, okay, I get it. You have to have the the
But
the the
also,
um the obstruction, towards the between the characters' goals and whatnot. So here, you have this rebel gang of Native Americans. Okay, fine, right? But like now, it's kind of cringe when you see this in other moments play out in other films, right?
right.
So I love how this film kind
Yeah.
of come and said, well, we're not addressing it, right? But we're taking that whole notion that, oh, every time you see characters like those in those films, they must be savages, and as we say, here's what we're gonna show you: actual savages. We're gonna show
Yes.
you cavemen. That's what it is, cavemen. But the
Mhm.
show itself kind of touches on, how they all assumed when you're going on this mission, on the search party, if you will. Yeah, it's a bunch of Native Americans, and we had to do something about it, right? So I love how the film was very, meta in terms of that of that
Yes.
argument, if you will, right, in terms of Native
Mhm.
American representation. Yeah, throughout film
Right.
history. I love that. That's great.
Well, it's one of the it's one of the things I indicate when I say it's an incredibly intelligent movie, because like it almost does this. I don't know. One of the things it is the way that indigenous Americans are treated is one of the most uncomfortable facts, one of the most uncomfortable aspects of the Western genre. And I'm saying this as someone who loves the genre, but I'll admit, yeah, there's it's not great that when Joss Whedon makes Firefly, it kind of becomes painfully clear that the Reavers are just essentially all the stereotypes that used to apply to Native Americans, but we've like
Right.
projected them into space. So
Kind of.
characters can kind of get right. So characters can just kind of get away with like still talking about characters, but like, oh, they're not actually talking about Native Americans now. They're
But
talking
you
about
okay?
these aliens or whatever.
Right,
Like,
right. I mean, that's a typical like space problem. Like you could say
yeah,
Star Wars. Star Wars did it with
Alan
we call it with
Tusken
the Sand
Raiders.
People. Right, a little bit,
Yep.
yeah. No, but
Yeah.
but in the context of Firefly, you do know how they created, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Did you see?
it's based. Go ahead.
No, you know the
Yeah, yeah.
story.
I've seen
Did you see?
Serenity. Yeah, yeah.
You saw Serenity. Okay,
That's,
right. Okay,
so yeah, I know like the secret of the Reavers, which
right. Yeah,
they're not like
government shenanigans.
aliens. Yeah, there's
Right.
all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff like that. Well, like, and I know that like Alan Moore of all people actually flagged that one of the big problems with sci-fi, with American sci-fi in particular, is that he's like it's just cowboys and aliens in space, where it's like
Right.
space rangers and Neptunians. But I think that Bone Tomahawk has a really fascinating answer to that, because it takes all of the like stereotypes and stuff about Native Americans and says, you realize that if these people were as horrific as you all were describing them, no one would live, right? Like you all understand that like you have created almost cartoon monsters. Here, let me create a species of people that are as
Right.
monstrous as some of these stereotypes and show you how horrific that would be. And I feel like that's one of the reasons. It's one of the reasons I was saying earlier about like how this is filmed with not very much like visual style to it. I think it's one of the best reasons to kind of have that, because it's an uncomfortable movie. It's an ugly movie at times. It kind of forces you to look at this brutality, and it's like, especially since like during some of the most violent sequences, the camera just holds on what is happening, and
Yes,
it's like,
yes.
look at it. You can't look away.
Now, speaking on, I just love how you say look at it in that theatrical way, right? Because last point I'll make before I get to my final thoughts, right? I find it
Mhm.
funny now, just thinking about the film now, is the song that plays during the closing credits. Um,
Wow.
I love this how theatrical and operatic the guy sounds when he's singing it. But what had me cracking
Mhm.
up though is the chorus of it where the guy says, "Four doomed men ride out." You know what I mean? Like almost like the writers of the songwriters are kind of making fun of the fact like, yes, these characters are going out to die, even though it's basically what, like, two of the characters survive, but it's just the idea that they are going out to their doom, right? I like that. It's very, very
Yeah, 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 yeah.
operatic. That's a really, really like subtle touch in the film, but
Mhm.
I imagine
and
like a
it's
lot of
got a
people
it's
would just sort of like, turn off, the TV or whatnot, or, close the file off when the movie ends. But it's like, no, listen to the song. Listen to the song. It's adding a lot to the story as well, too. I love that. I love that. Yeah.
well, what I was about to say as well. It kind of adds a certain Western folklore mythology element to it as well, where there's kind of it's got that kind of, I mean, a little more operatic. You're right, but like it's got a little bit of that kind of that Marty Robbins sound to it with some of
Mhm.
the like the Western ballad thing going, which I really,
Yes.
yeah, I
Ballad.
really,
That's what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
really yes, really good.
Yeah. So in closing, again, this is off of my first viewing. Yeah, I really enjoyed this film. This is one in retrospect that I wish I got into, I wish that not so much that I got into it back in 2015, but I wish that I had sorted out much, earlier on, instead of waiting till it reached its 10th anniversary, right? But yeah, I can imagine people who saw that movie back in 2015 rewatching this thing 10 years afterwards and still being impacted by this film, right? I just love how raw it is, how gritty it is, but I love that it is still wholeheartedly a Western. It's not like it betrays the audience by becoming this torture fest or whatever it is. It's not like, we went from sutures and just went to hostile territory just like that. As I said, Hills of Eyes, right? Where is this sort of like not so much Western, but in mountains, the desert basically, and it's just this like
Mhm.
weird tribe of cannibals that characters run into and chaos takes place, right? So I like that with the genre mashup, it does not betray the audience because yes, it does still
Yes.
feel like a Western that you're watching here, right? It just takes the whole oh, these characters are being captured by Indians. We need to go after them, and flips it now and turns it into like this genuinely like horrific, film, right? But it still works. And of course, performance is great, writing is still in my opinion, and of course, direction is strong, right? So for me, strong 4 to a very like 4.5 out of 5. This is a great film. This is one that I would say if you're looking for something a little bit different as far as like your horror viewing material, for Halloween and onward, yeah, definitely check this out though, because yeah, this is probably one of the most unconventional horror films out there, and yet it still is a Western and feels like a Western true and true. I really enjoy that, right? But yeah, this is a film again I wish I got on the hype train for earlier on, boy, but I'm glad that I
Yeah,
finally
yeah, yeah.
got the chance to check it out, right? But yeah, before we get to Ricardo, 'cause I know his thoughts haven't changed on the film. Yeah, CC, final thoughts on and rating on this film here.
I was very pleasantly like I went in expecting good things. Ricardo is a critic and as someone who appreciates things, like generally I'm like, oh, if Ricardo likes something, I will generally give this I'll give this a shot. So there was that going in, but then also, Kurt Russell's in it, and like I had heard good things about it. And I had actually had a couple friends recommend it to me as like, wow, you gotta this is really visceral Western. So I had a great time with this. I was pleasantly surprised, even with all the high standards going in and the number of recommendations I was expecting. I was impressed with how intelligent it is, how much it works as a survival film, not just a horror film, not just as a Western,
Right.
but as a pretty gnarly survival movie. And I love survival. Survival films are kind of one of my favorite, very specific subgenres. It's one of the reasons why I love the Poseidon Adventure, the original. Um, I have, and so Bone Tomahawk scratches that itch, but also most of this runtime is such a simple character-driven Western with 4 incredibly well-written characters played by 4 great underrated actors. And so even those bits that are the slowest parts of the film, I could easily see the film as being kind of boring if those parts had not been as well written and as well cast as they were. And Bone Tomahawk, aside from that pretty gnarly opening, is actually a film that takes a little while to get going.
Right.
But it's so well written and the characters are so well done that you are invested, and then all of the like gnarly stuff happens in it. So yeah, I am similarly. I'm definitely leaning on like a 9 out of 10 or a 4.5 out of 5 like for this one. Like I really really appreciated this one, and I was glad to watch it and glad to have the excuse to finally watch it.
Right. And one more thing before we get to Ricardo, right? So in that trailer, right, the moment where it kind of tells you what type of show this movie really is yeah, that moment where Kurt Russell collects like where a bone, well, technically the tomahawk, if you will, is like shoved down his mouth. that's when you're like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. Perfect shot to close the trailer off, I must say, right? But yeah, that is a moment
That
that
was
will stay with me for a
beautiful.
long while. But yeah, Ricardo, close things off. And, thank you so much for putting us onto this. But yeah, final thoughts and rating. And yeah, looking back at it, since it came out 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, this, in my humble opinion, a kind of a modern horror classic. It totally holds up where to watch it 10 years later. It just, again, to me, good atmosphere. It's the kind of movie that I just didn't expect. Again, when T blind, and that is a big factor as to why I enjoyed it. But like, it just sets up great atmosphere. Again, CC put it, great characterization. Just a solid, smart script. I'll admit, it does get a little while to get going, but that's a part of it. That builds up and makes it work. If you're rewatching it, you can say, alright, a little slow. But the first time watching it, it's like, no, you don't know where it's going. It's just like, you're just with them, and then they hit the double twist, and it's like, okay, all you in a place. This is not fun now. All you're in trouble. And it really sets up a great set of great atmosphere and set of conceits. And it just, the violence is great, and our use of violence is great, but it's not, again, too much shock value or anything like that. It's like a lot of it works, and yeah, I just thoroughly loves it. It still holds up. Yeah, rating, I probably give it like a 9 out of 10. Not perfect. Like I'm going back and watching it, I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll probably change this or that, the other. Normal nitpick bullshit, but it still totally works for me. Yeah, 9 out of 10. Love this movie. It still holds up. Again, mostly because of the surprise, I will admit, but it still holds up.